credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Vitruvian Man podcast, a podcast centered around self-mastery. I'm your host, Zach Shankin. Today, I'm joined by Alexander Cullen. Alex is a young entrepreneur, esotericist, and holistic and alternative health wizard, amongst a number of other interesting endeavors that he's working on. I'm excited for our discussion today. Alex, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you, man. I like the wizard little input there. But yeah, thank you so much, man. It's very interesting being on a podcast for the second time, but very excited to get it going.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, we connected over Twitter a ways back, and I'm glad we finally got to carve out time for that call, which honestly could have been a podcast in and of itself. It ended up being pretty detailed, and I was like, okay, we should definitely hop on and let the people in on our conversation. And it's always funny to hear that piece of feedback from people about like, oh, I'm nervous. Like I reached out to, I don't know if you know the creator Abby Jean. She's kind of like in the female empowerment, like her specific thing. I think she works with women on trying to be like less present online and like absorbed in kind of self-image issues.
Okay.
But just kind of like very fascinating mind, like based on what her writing. So I like, she commented something about podcasts and I was like, yo, come on my podcast. And so we were DMing a little bit and she's like, I've never been on one. Like, I'm really, really nervous. And I was like, it's literally like just a conversation. And I always kind of frame it myself that way. Cause like realistically, like whether it's an audience of 1,000 or like 100,000, the best podcasts I listen to as somebody who like kind of voraciously consumes them in general is that when it's just a conversation, right? Like it's just two people being really present, because it's pretty easy to tell how human it is. And our generation specifically, I think, has like such a like finely tuned bullshit meter for inauthenticity. Like we just can't even stomach interviews at all, like when it's so pre-recorded. Like I think in the event I walk past a TV that has mainstream news on it and I just like absorb small amounts of it, I'm just like, how can people sit transfixed by this stuff? Like what's the weather like today, Bill? Do you see what's in the news? Like
but people don't like understand. They're not like, I know we talked about it before, but they're not on like that. They don't have that awareness. They don't.
Yeah.
You can tell something, at least with us, where we try to be authentic with what we do. And you can definitely tell. There's a few podcasts I've been listening to recently where you can just tell like they've ran through it completely before and they're just going through it. That's why it's like so hard to watch the news as well, because everything's just it's fake. You can't really, there's no attachment there.
Yeah, I mean it completely divorces like the human element. And honestly, I think you can extend it to like really a lot of arenas in life, like buildings that are designed clearly for efficiency and rather than form. Like I don't know how much like world traveling you have done, but like you get to see like a 1,500-year-old church, which like each brick was laid by hand by somebody clearly worshiping a higher power. Like there is energy imbued in that. There's a human touch. And then you go to, I don't know, any of our major American cities and you see like a very rectangular square building, like square panes of glass. Even like honestly, most public schools, they're built very similar to like prisons.
They are.
It's just it's very cold and non-emotional and I don't know, almost inhuman in that sense.
Yeah, because it's like they want to, in my mind, it's like they're just trying to remove beauty from the world. They're trying to make everything ugly. Like I saw something from BAP this morning where it was like only 1.5% of Iceland is actually like forestation now, because it's just all being torn down for buildings and whatever. So there's just this huge, I like to say, amalgamation of ugliness everywhere, just everywhere. You walk into New York City I mean, there are some like cool Gothic structures in there, with gargoyle, whatever. But overall, you're not going to find very many places where there's intrinsic beauty to the environment anymore, especially now in America, at least in America.
I think it's yes and no, but what's really crazy is I think like we forget how absolutely enormous America is. Like we just
Yeah.
have such a unbelievable amount of like space. Like we like
Yeah.
it can feel very small when you're kind of just like jet setting. And I think when we're young, it's like, oh, it's like Miami, New York, LA. Like you're kind of going to these hot spots where there's a lot of other young people and like where business is at, and like there's a reason to be there. But I mean, you just start driving in any direction. It takes days to get through like places you didn't even know existed, and even states that have those bigger cities, like you just drive 3 hours away in any direction and you're in the middle of nowhere. So I think there's just a lot of untapped like raw potential with America, and it's kind of a massive difference compared to maybe like a European continent where like each country is equivalent of like our states, you know?
Right.
So
Right.
it's just we have a lot of room for it, and it is encouraging for me and like future projects I want to work on where it's like there will be a place to become sovereign and just like create a community, because there is just so much space. Like if I just drove to the middle of nowhere, then I could have all of nowhere to myself, at least for a while, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's how I think. Like I hear like I live in New York. I live in like upstate New York, very rural, not like I always tell people in New York, "Oh, you're from the city." I'm like, "No, I've been in the city like 3 times. I hate the city." So it's like this gold mine. You'd never expect it because up here you get, I have all the fresh farmers markets near me, and you have like a ton of just like old history here. Like it's very historical, back to when like one of the first places that the pilgrims, whatever, found when they were here. But there's just a ton of it's like I don't know how to explain it. There's like these little niches in America that you'd never think that would be great. Like I was in North Carolina 2 years ago, and there's this little town that I passed through, and I stayed there for like 2 days just because there's this like you'd never be able to find it anywhere else because it's just so. I have a hard time putting buildings and the environment into words just because I get so like
Excited.
excited about it. Like New York is actually just a great state with awful ownership, I guess.
Yeah. And I think that's the unfortunate truth for a lot of really incredible places like California coming kind of almost to paramount there, where it's like
Mm-hmm.
kind of some of the most beautiful real estate on earth. I mean, like San Diego, LA, Malibu, like it unparalleled weather and environment, but yeah, unfortunate ownership and all of that stuff. But I think there is something about those like hidden gems, like very nostalgic, almost like untouched by time towns. And that's the thing, is like you wouldn't expect those places outside of communities that intentionally seek it out, like an Amish. Um, like normal people, they just kind of chill and do their thing. And it for me it helps be almost like a white pill when you drive through those places, because I think we get wrapped up in this like hyper information pushing like AI's coming, the end is nigh kind of situation, and it does get really scary. Like you think about people getting hooked up to like feed tubes, turning into like really dystopic futures, like whether it's like Wall-E or freaking Blade Runner, like stuff that we've seen in
Yeah.
TV and read in books, like very Orwellian. And I don't know that that's not going to happen, but I do think that there will be these like bastions of vitality where people just like choose to live a different way. Like as
Mm-hmm.
much as we make internet money from the internet, and that's like a super powerful tool to leverage, um, you can just close the computer and like be a human being. And so I think my imagination of what the like future is going to look like is there's kind of going to just be like two boats where like people are either going to fully dive into non-reality and like just throw the goggles on and stay in the metaverse or whatever we're going to call it into perpetuity, and like they'll just take in the nutrients they need to not die, and it'll be just kind of like Wall-E. But then there's going to be like other people that completely kind of divorce themselves and return to these like weird micro communities where,
Mm-hmm.
you know, Jim down the road, he's the livestock guy, like I do the woodworking, you know what I mean? I don't know. That's how I imagine it, is almost like this like weird endpoint where it's kind of bifurcated, and the what quote unquote sovereign individuals that choose to like live in the dirt and the grass and like be a human being choose that path, and then the metaverse is its other thing. But maybe that's like who knows how far down the road that is, and who knows like how policy is going to affect all this stuff. But I don't know. It's very, very out there.
I don't think that's too far down the line. I'm gonna be honest. The way things are just, you gotta think about how far. Like we had the Nintendo 64, what, 20 years ago. Now we have literal people that are living in virtual reality like every day. And I read, if you've read Gothic Violence by Mike Ma, he has the book basically is based around these people that want to retake Florida as the Atlantean state. They want to, they live in this very Zog like country. It's very locked down and everything. And these people just band together and they decide, hey, we're going to retake Florida. We're going to cut all the power and we're just going to take it. And like you said, they build these little microcosms of communities, people that do, maybe they have butchers, they have like people that make leather and clothes and all that stuff. And I really think that is how it's going to end up. There's just this huge divide in the country. And I don't know when that's going to happen, but I think it will happen just because of how diversified the world is just becoming as a whole.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, I think there's like so many levels of dependency though. Like for me, like I'd say I'm well above average for competencies. Like I can work with my hands, like I'm pretty good with all tools, like competent in that sense. But like I've never skinned an animal. Like if I was actually just
Mhm.
thrown into the woods, like there are things that I could figure out on the fly, I guess. But I don't have those like level, like I don't know how to cultivate a field of any sort of crop.
Yeah.
And like I don't know, it's just an interesting interesting thing to muse on. But before we go too far down the line, I think I want to
Yeah.
circle back to you specifically. And the way I like to typically start these is I want to hear a little bit about your path to like it's kind of where we started the conversation about like levels of awareness.
Mhm.
And I think whether you like, I call it kind of self mastery, like this pursuit of your highest self, but self actualization, self development, there's a lot of different bucket terms. I'm kind of curious to hear your origin story in that sense. Like, where did it start for you? Was it a specific book, a specific low point, a specific person that came into your life? And then how do you find yourself where you are now, kind of in this world of like holistic health knowledge, esotericism, and like really wanting to pursue the best for yourself?
So it's very like ironic. I started on this journey based off of memes. I saw this one video of like, Ronnie Coleman lifting. He's like lightweight, and then there's like, a little dark age edit song in the background. And I was like 15 at the time, and I'm having like a euphoric like moment. I'm like, dude, I gotta get big. And I just started. So I didn't have a car. I started going to Planet Fitness like once a week just because it was all my family could like fit in schedule wise. And then from there, I just started lifting more at home and I got into like really heavy bodybuilding. By the time I was like 16 that summer, I was taking in like 4,000 calories a day and it was just awful. I'm a small guy. I'm 5'5", 160 pounds. Like I don't need 4,000 calories. But to me, I was watching Rich Piana every day and Jay Cutler and thinking, oh yeah, I need to just eat as much as I can. And I got fat. I was up to like 180 and I just was big. I was just a bloated little bowling ball basically. So then I started looking through, okay, what are some, I feel like I'm not doing it right. Like what can I be doing right? And then I stumbled upon Stoicism. So for the first time, I went into Barnes and Nobles and I picked out How to Give by Seneca. Actually, was the first book. That book was fantastic, and it still is. And then I went through Meditations with Marcus Aurelius and some of the works of Zeno and all those different Stoics from way back when. And then I got onto NoFap, which was probably the biggest turning point in my life, just because I was heavily addicted to porn for about 7 years. And I speak about it so much because I'm so passionate about it because it's just it's such a ruiner for young guys. Like I don't wish I think it's the single worst thing that young guys can do for themselves, just because it taints every aspect of their lives. You cannot like look at a woman the same. You can't work out the same. Your energy levels are just plummeted. You're screwed from the time if you start at 14, you're just screwed. And it's a dark hole to get out of because of how it works the same as just cocaine. I read a few books on it. Your brain on porn is a fantastic book that goes into how your dopamine levels are affected and serotonin. So I got through that. And then from there, I just started thinking about how to live more naturally because I knew what was right and what wasn't. And then I was using Instagram a bit more and I found I found Solbra for the first time. And I read his stuff and he's got the aesthetic images on every post and he's talking about diet and, being spiritual. And I'm just infatuated. I sit down for days and just scroll through his Instagram and read and read and read everything that I can. And then from there, this was about 2 years ago, I just started taking a very different approach. I stopped eating as much. I tried to start eating more naturally. I moved all the food out of my cupboards and replaced it with grass-fed stuff, coconut oil, all that type of stuff that's just very good for you. But then about a year ago, I got more into it. I got super heavy into it and I wanted to start posting on Twitter about it. So I was posting on Twitter for a little bit and then I signed up for the military. So I basically put my entire life on hold. All the holistic health out the window, all the Twitter posting out the window. And it wasn't until I came back this year that I really started hammering it heavy. I started doing the sauna and I really took my own life into my own hands and started removing those self-limiting beliefs. So it's been a long journey for me just because it took so long. I didn't have like a personal trainer. I didn't really use a personal trainer just because I felt like I needed to do it on my own. It was more like a self-discovering journey because it stemmed a lot from girls. And at the time, when I was 15, 16, I was all about women. I wanted a girlfriend. I wanted to get with more girls, blah, 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 blah. And then after I got through all the stoicism stuff, I was like, yeah, I don't need a girl. But it just because it's just like, you can learn to be happy by yourself. And that's what a lot of people get wrong about like romantic relationships. If you yourself are not happy, there's no chance in the world that you can make someone else happy. It's like, why would you give someone this baggage when you can't even fix it yourself? It just doesn't make sense to me. And that's why I've waited so long, I guess, just because I don't feel as peaked as I could be.
Mm.
And yeah, anyway, I'm finally back starting to do more holistic stuff and I'm posting on Twitter about it just because I feel like it's very important to inform everybody about how to live naturally. And you understand too, it's just like it's bigger than us. It'll always be bigger than us. We have to create this movement that's so big and so loud that it cannot be unheard.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, a lot I want to touch back on, but I definitely want to. It's interesting you say that. It's very synchronistic because I had my call with one of the guys I work with earlier today, and we were talking about like again, kind of what we talked about before this podcast, where it was like given so much that like it would be to spit in the face of God to not try and like really, really push for something. And it doesn't, for everybody, it doesn't always mean like you build $100 million business or you're going to be the next Steve Jobs, but it could be as simple as just being a really excellent teacher at a school or a coach on a team or a father to like your children, like the imperceptible like butterfly effect of that. Like even if you just make one really, really powerful impact on that one person and then they become the next whoever, but it was because you helped them shatter a limiting belief or get them into the best shape of their life or whatever it may be, like helping people access vitality physically and then also unlock, in my opinion, more importantly, like the shackles of their mind, because I think all of it like comes cascading out once you break through a lot of those limiting beliefs, as well as just like getting yourself to do the work. Like most people know what is or is not healthy on like the high level, non-biohacker. Like you just need to eat whole foods, get in the sun, walk around, train. Like your body will tell you all the answers you need. But the question isn't the what, it's more, to me, like, why aren't you doing what you know you need to do? And that's a lot tougher of an egg to crack, because people, it could date back all the way to when they were a kid and how their parents showed up for them about how confident they are to step into this new identity. So it's definitely very, very interesting. But I'm curious, we didn't get to talk about this before, so I want to know, like, what actually informed. So did you go to university, and then what made you decide to just like step into the military?
I finished my last year of high school. So I graduated last year from high school. And in January of last year, I watched the movie 300 with Leonidas. I watched the movie 300, and a week later I signed up for the military because I was like, I felt this very primal and masculine urge to do something greater. I felt like I had to have some sort of pride, some sort of just some sort of prideful background. I felt like I needed to do something more than something that would give me honor and pride. So I signed up in January of last year, and then I went to basic from July to I got out in January this year. Um, but I knew I didn't want to go to school. That I always knew that I didn't want to go to school. I was a little mixed about it about 2 years ago, but then it hit me. It's like I know people that make money outside of school. I don't feel like I need to go. So I decided to just do something that I know would give me a lot of life experience, like some things that I can't get back. I learned a ton while I was there, and it's just you just feel like you did something great. If I could, like we talked about before, I could die tomorrow and know that I did something great and that I could be proud of. That's all I wanted from it. A sense of honor, a sense of brotherhood, to be a part of something bigger than myself.
What does that look like moving forward? Are you like, is that just a one and done window for you, or like, is there involvement moving forward?
So I'm in the Army National Guard. So it's basically a part-time, I like to call it. So I'll do a weekend a month or 2 weekends, and then you go for training 2 weeks throughout the year. So in August, I'm going down to Michigan for 2 weeks of training. But I always do wish I did something more with the military, just because there's a lot of opportunity there. I could have gone airborne, I could have gone Ranger, Special Forces, but I felt like there was a lot to do to come home. I wanted to build I wanted to start doing fitness coaching and all that. I wanted to actually make money because the money in the military is very very poor. That's just not something I was really interested in. But yeah, it's not too much commitment on my end over the course of the next 6 years or so, but it could be. If I get promoted to a certain rank, it would force me to take on some more responsibility, which I would love, just because I love the military, I do, but it's just not something that's in my priority at the moment.
Interesting. Yeah, I just didn't know how that kind of like functionally worked. I do want to go back though, a little bit further to when you were kind of breaking through some of these pretty important either destructive patterns of like actual behavior or like the thought patterns behind them. Like, what were some of the things that pulled you out of them? Like, I know you talked about the impact of stoicism. It's like a core, it's an important philosophy in the program that I run my guys through too, because I think it's just, I mean, there's a criticism around stoicism. I think it's kind of a reductionist criticism where it's like, oh, you just don't have emotions. But
Yeah.
I mean, if you take any amount of a nuanced look at it, it's a lot more that you acknowledge your emotions and observe them and then just choose not to act on them. It's very like
Right.
Buddhist in that way. It's like very Eastern almost, but like I don't think people take a deep enough look at it or really internalize it. But what I do like about it is that unlike the Eastern traditions, it's very digestible. Like it comes to us in language that we understand. It's told to us by people that are contextually um more digestible, like these kings and philosophers, rather than just like mystics and monks and stuff, which I think is a little bit more spiritual than many people can kind of initially handle. And I think with
Mhm.
books like The Obstacle is the Way and like Ryan Holiday really championing this school of philosophy and kind of like bringing it to a new life, because I mean people have been reading it forever. It's actually funny to go back. Like my first exposure to it was like a 2007, I think, or 2008 TED Talk from Tim Ferriss. I don't know if you were
Oh
ever
wow.
in the OG Tim Ferriss days, but like back when he was putting out the 4 Hour Work Week, I read that in high school. And
Yeah.
then he did a TED Talk on Stoicism, but like it's like I feel like he doesn't, nobody now would associate Stoicism with Tim Ferriss, but like
No.
the people that are around, you should look it up. It's pretty good, but I mean, it's just really really interesting because he talks about like, I think the clickbaity title was like the most effective school of philosophy for productivity or something, like, so a very Tim Ferriss title. But it was just interesting, and that was like my first exposure. And like I said, I think the reason it's powerful is that you don't have to get too heady and academic. And like I love going through all like that like type of stuff, right? Like Nietzsche,
Mhm.
Dostoevsky, like just
Yeah.
getting into the weeds of like philosophy and some dark stuff. Like it's very interesting to me. I love to read and write, but I think for the masses and for like broadly applicable, it's very easy to digest. Kind of like Jordan Peterson, right? Like people love to like tear him down because there are points at which when you get into like levels of nuance and granularity, you can probably pick them apart. But like ultimately, if people just lived more similarly to his 12 rules for life, like just take care of yourself and be a good person at scale, that would work really well. And I think it's why he's been able to get such broad acclaim, is because it's a very simple message.
Yeah. Like with Jordan Peterson and what was I gonna say? Like just stoicism as a whole. It, like you said, it's very digestible. It's something that you can read and you can internalize and pick up like that instant. Like when I was reading it, like I would open up my notebook at the end of every night and I'd write down what could I have changed and what could I have not changed. And then I'd list them out and then I'd worry about what I could have changed. You know, I didn't go to the gym today. That's my own issue and I should take the blame for that. What I couldn't control is my dog shit on the floor and I had to pick it up. That's just, you know, I'm not going to get mad at that. And it was a really hard thing for me because uh I was very huge in the video games for a long, long time. Like it was my life and I'd get mad and like uncontrollably mad. So learning to control my emotions was one of the hardest things for me just because I was always very confused. I didn't really know what to feel or how to interpret them or how to really transfer them into different emotions, like transferring anger into positivity, you know, being mad and then going to the gym. You know, you're feeling very, very sexual, go to the gym. Don't act on those hedonistic tendencies. But yeah, stoicism and I have the 12 rules for life. I've read about halfway through it, but like if people just took these very basic principles and really hammered them in instead of taking all these different, like we talked before about getting into philosophy super heavy when you're young and how that can really affect you. It affected me too because I was reading, you know, Marcus Aurelius. I was reading Nietzsche for a little while I was younger, and I couldn't even like comprehend what these people were saying, but I was just like I was still just trying to consume it, and then it didn't really amount to anything. I kind of ended up back at square one.
Yeah, no, I think having somebody be the liaison, especially at the early stages, like they have to warm you up to the ideas, but in a way that you can take and internalize and immediately take into action steps. I mean, I think it's like why the coaching courses online space matters and like isn't and never will be kind of oversaturated. Like it's important, like I don't know. We talked about on the first call, and I think it's like good to bring in here is that like people are love to be very critical of like copying or plagiarizing or like non-original ideas, but I think there's a very strong argument to make, and I land a lot more in this camp, that there are not original ideas, and we are simply reteaching over and over to like the next generation, using new words, using new concepts, using new frameworks and mental models, the same fundamental truths that have always been true. And it's why a 2,000-year-old document, or even many documents that are older than that from these teachers across time and history, can be applicable today, because like the context changes, but the man in the context doesn't. Like human nature is like somewhat, in my opinion, immutable. And what's nuts about like a document like Marcus Aurelius's Meditations is that he's dealing with, in completely different context than all of us, right? He's a emperor of a nation undergoing plague, as well as like just general political turmoil, but he's writing about dealing with the same types of things that we deal with today, like irritating people, people not understanding you, like just the normal day-to-day issues that we tend to deal with. And then also like his internal world, like a window into his mind, like his internal struggles are very similar to those that we experience and understand today. And I just think that kind of stuff is really, really remarkable. John Green, I don't know if you ever consumed any of his content in high school, but like John Green talks about this really pretty idea that I like a lot, which is like imagine others complexly. And there's like a lot of this NPC talk now, like the other people that are not whatever, they're just NPCs. But the truth of the matter is, like, every person out there is just as complex as you. They have like all of these issues that they deal with, like losing loved ones, heartbreak, busy day at work, stress, all of these things. So like, to me, it helps a lot with empathy, like radical empathy towards any moment. You get cut off in traffic. Like, how could you get mad at that person? Because you don't know their story. You don't know what they're bringing to that equation. Or like a great example would be like a service worker, right? Like somebody fucks up at a restaurant, like don't just blow up on them for doing that. Like just show grace and empathy, because it could have been the worst day of their life. Like this could be a triple shift. They could have been in there forever. And I think by extension, this imagine others complexly thing also extends throughout history too. Like they're not just dry names on a page that are in a history book that we've heard one time. These are actually living and breathing people that like had very, very complicated lives. So I think that that's really, really cool. And I thought that something that did that really well somewhat recently was when like Hamilton the musical came out. A character that was not well talked about, just kind of some dude that did this one thing with the bank, and we learned the things in history class that like check the boxes about the quiz, but like he was a complex person, right? Like he dealt with love and loss, and his kid died, and all these like really dramatic things. And to see it in Technicolor in like a musical format really humanizes his character. And every one of these dudes that we read about in history were just as dynamic as them. And I think it does a lot for like the empathy of it, but it also really is an kind of an like internally empowering thing, because you're like, oh, I'm also another person in this lineage. Like I have access. Like Alexander the Great was a dude. I am also a dude. Like I can do things of that magnitude. And then you start to like really extrapolate or like pick apart their mindsets, like what allowed these men to be great. Like an awesome podcast I'm just like diving through right now is Founders. And it talks about like the greatest founders of businesses in history, but it also some of the great men, like he considers like Alexander like a founder of like ideas or whatever. And it's just like amazing to read through these people's stories, hear their words. Steve Jobs is a massive inspiration of myself, and he talked about the world around you is made up by people no smarter than you. Like that's so empowering. Like as somebody who has ambitions, it's like nobody else has more permission than you to go make change.
Right.
You just have to give yourself that permission.
Right. That's very interesting. And it's very empowering to think, like when you read through these like historical texts, like you said, like they're just a dude. It's literally just a person. Like you can't, like you can do whatever you want to do, and it's very limiting in the modern world, because obviously you can't go and conquer 4 other countries. It's just not possible. But you can apply that to other things. Like that's why Art of War works so well, Book of Five Rings, just because they're so applicable to things you're doing. They're not sure they talk about the way of the sword and war and all that, but those are just very core principles and central ideas that you can apply to every single thing you do. And that's what's so great about like classic text, because it's always very transferable in its knowledge, and you can always pass that through with other kind of things, I guess.
So yeah, I'm curious, like, what drew you to a lot of these like classical texts? I mean, it's like relatively uncommon for a 15-year-old kid, a 16-year-old kid to be like diving through works of philosophy and works of like Eastern tradition and stuff. And, like I was also the black sheep doing similar kind of stuff. So
Yeah.
I definitely empathize there, but I'm curious, like, was that something you were just always reading from a little kid, or like, were there just a lot of books in the home, or did somebody kind of present you with, like, they saw you and they were like, hey, like, maybe you should read a little bit of this?
Yeah, I think it was when I don't it's a YouTuber, Matt Diavella.
Nice. Yeah.
He was huge when I was in high school. Huge. Like he was in my recommended and everything. And he would talk about, minimalism and stoicism and reading all this different philosophy. So I started diving into that. And at first it was just like, oh, I'm just gonna read philosophy because it would sound cool, because I want to do philosophy. Because I was a 15, 16-year-old kid, I just thought it would be cool. But then you dive into it more, and you really start to pick apart these principles and these different books, and you're like, okay, well, these are actual things I'm interested in, diving into the human psyche. But yeah, that's when I really started getting into all the self-help things through Matt D, like just some random YouTuber that popped up and just motivated me to really start doing things. And I think it also, like, I've ran into this problem recently where it's like over optimizing to the point where it's you're optimizing for all these things, you're doing all these health things, you're reading all these books, you're doing all these things to put in place, you're doing minimalism, whatever. But at the end of the day, there's no needle moving. There's just nothing being actually done. And that's why you see on Twitter a lot the people who are like, oh, the Huberman types, the optimizers or whatever. But it's a very like thin line to walk if you're trying to, one, better yourself, and two, do something with yourself, because you've got to take into account not only your business but like your health as a person. Like you can't function if you aren't in good health, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. um that was a little bit of a rant on
No, no,
that,
no.
but
I think it's good. I mean, I talked on a previous podcast. I had Noah Ryan. You may see him on Twitter. He's like
yeah.
one of these big biohacker types, but he actually put something up about it today where he's like, I am knowledgeable, not neurotic. And he kind of like expounded on that idea. But the point is, like, it doesn't hurt you to know more unless you let it hurt you. And
Mm-hmm.
it hasn't come out yet, but I did a like part 2 with my friend Ryan Ayala, and we talked a lot about like, we went at depth about like my relationship with food. And I think anyone who gets into like, everybody starts as this insecure little kid. You start training, like, I want to get jacked, whatever. And then you learn on YouTube and start tracking your food, you start seeing results. But then it gets like into like orthorexia, where like you're talking about, like, you're over focused on what you're consuming. And, he had this good quote Ryan brought up. He's like, somebody was out at dinner. I can't remember who said it, but basically, like, they're going out to eat. There's this dude who's like very health focused, and like the dessert comes up, or maybe it was like a drink of alcohol. And it's from Matthew McConaughey. It was like from his book, Green Lights. And he said, like, the guy basically like reached over and grabbed his arm. And he said, Matthew, the pleasure is good for you. And I think that's like really, really powerful in like the health space, especially for me, like as somebody who's still like working to really get a great relationship with food back, is that there is something like imperceptible and energetic about the actual positive energy of a moment, like the joy you receive from whether it's a dessert or like sharing a drink with friends, like that stuff objectively on like the like optimizer route, like alcohol is poison, processed sugars are poisonous, like and toxic to your body, whatever. But like if you there was something to be said that the pleasure you get from that, or like if you're really, really present in that moment, it will actually outweigh and it won't really have a negative health effect unless you're hyper fixated on it, in which
Right.
case the stress itself is oxidative and like is going to cause increased harm. So like overly focusing on it almost puts you in a place where you're doing yourself more harm than the good that you sought out to do in the first place. And it extends, I think, to all arenas of life. Like if you have this optimized morning routine, or you're somebody who's like, oh, I can't do a normal day without meditating or taking my, special breathwork session or whatever. Like if it is no longer helping you, and I think this is a Hormozy quote, it's like, if a habit or a behavior or routine or whatever is no longer helping you, but you have to do it, it's become a vice. Like it's become basically like
Mm-hmm.
a toxic habit rather than a tool to make your life better. So I think the best like heuristic is just always remembering the 80-20 rule. Like it's a law that governs the universe. Like there are disproportionate outputs to inputs. So you just need to position yourself where the disproportionate return is coming to you for as limited output as you need. So you don't need to be spending 4 hours in the gym every single day, high intensity training sets, only eating the cleanest food in the world. Just eat whole foods, train enough, walk around, get in the sun. Like it's kind of where we started this conversation, right? Like keep it simple, stupid goes a lot longer than people may presume. But I think the crux of most of the issues is just doing the things consistently. And that's where like I think, the vast majority of people fall apart. It goes back to the very beginning of this, where like I think it's super important to address the internal reasons why you're not taking the steps in the first place, as opposed to giving the X's and O's of like, here's how you get healthy.
Yeah, I think I like to think of it as play as hard as you work, because it doesn't amount to anything if you aren't doing that. Like over the past few months, I've just been working, and not really allowing myself time to do anything, quote unquote relaxing. But recently, I've just been letting I went to an MMA event yesterday for like 6-7 hours with my buddy, and we just chilled out. I didn't even think about work. I didn't do anything, and it was great. And now I'm ready to get back into things, and it's just giving yourself that healthy balance. But like you said, it's consistency. There's people walk that very, very thin line where it's like they work for maybe an hour or two, and then they just fuck off for the rest of the day. They're like, okay, I got my work done, now I can just whatever. And it's very hard, especially today, just because of how much stimulus you're able to get. Like think about, like I have a PS5 sitting over there, dude. Like if I wanted to, I could just say, screw it. I'm not gonna work today. I'm gonna go play Call of Duty for 7 hours because it's right there. But having that discipline, I think discipline's the root of everything. It's the root of everything. If you want to get better at just literally anything, you have to have some sort of consistent discipline in place. Because I just have a lot of trouble with routine um in recent times, just because it's hard. You know exactly what you have to do, but it's just actually doing it can be the hardest part, just because it's comfortability. When I came back from basic training, it was hard for me because I was so stuck in this single routine of just people told me what to do every single day. I didn't have to do anything. But now that I'm out, I actually have to go out and I have to get my own job. I have to work my own hours. I actually have to sit down and work. It's just been a super tough adjustment for me, like discipline wise.
What are some things that you have done or implemented, whether it's mental models or actual like how you structure your day, that has helped or like you feel like is helping in that?
Yeah, I think it's just taking a little bit the night before and just planning out your day. So, like I'll wake up at 6:15, or I'll wake up at 5:40, go to the gym at 6:15, and then go to work at 8. It's just taking like that little bit of time, even though because it's this nagging thought in the back of your head, like, dude, I don't want to go to work tomorrow. I don't want to plan for the day. But it just takes like 5 minutes to plan out your day, if 5 minutes. And I think it was just telling myself to just stop being a bitch and to buckle up and just do what I have to do. Like I know exactly what I need to do. It's just I don't want to do it. But it gets to a point where like the things I heard Brute say this the other day, and it was like the things you the things that are going to move the needle are boring. You don't want to do the things that are actually going to move the needle, but those are the things you have to do. Like you have to take this time to plan out your day. You have to take the time to fucking eat so you can fuel to work out. You have to take the time to have some deep focus sessions for an hour or two each day. Like just doing I just think of it as growing up. Like I just got to stop being a kid and thinking that things are going to come easy to me. Just do what I have to do because I know what it is.
Yeah, but I think that an argument could be made that like not everybody has that just like, okay, I'll just figure it out kind of thing, you know, like I just need to figure it out and then you just start doing it, right? Like I think a lot of people have a very hard time flipping that switch. And like I'm still trying to distill a thesis for why, because I think I'm in your camp, right? Like it's like I see the thing that I want to do. I generally understand the steps necessary, and then I just start executing. And it's not easy. I mean, like for me to get to the place where I'm now self-employed and like working on this and everything that I have going on full time, like it took from the second I took my full-time job, like I was working the morning before I would leave for work. I could get a little bit of work done, and then I would bike over to work, spend the whole day there. And then even on like the pauses at work, I had like an incognito window. I was doing work then, and then I would get home, go to the gym, get back from the gym, had like 1 or 2 hours. I mean, like I'm taking sales calls during that time. I'm doing outreach, doing like content, and then all weekend, Saturday, Sunday, like, and I did that for like 8 or 9 months or like 10 months to like make it happen. Right. And it was one of those things, like if I want to get to the place where I if I want to live the life of my dreams, it's going to take some work. Like you just got to buckle down and do it. But I think a lot of people are stuck a lot earlier in I guess the alt loop where it's like, typically they'll say like, I don't know what to do. I think a lot of people will point at like, what are the steps? What are the whatever? It's why people end up getting like buying like hella courses, but never actually opening them. Or like books, dude. I heard a tragic statistic. It was like something like 98 or 97% of all books purchased are never read.
What?
Like something just like actually like almost as a person who just loves books so much and aspires to write great books eventually, like that is a tragic statistic. But it does not surprise me. I mean, like even in my house, like there's a library full of books, like many of them uncreased, you know. And I try for myself, like I'm trying to be better because everyone, once you start reading and you tell people you read, they're like, oh, read this one. So like you put it on your list, you order the book on Amazon and it gets there and like
you never get to it.
But now I have a thing for me personally that like I don't get to order a new book until I read all the books that are unread that I have. And so I kind of just try to keep it at like a one at a time cycle, just as like a discipline, because like there's the like you kind of alluded to that like mental masturbation where you're just like reading a lot of things but not doing anything. I think the next degree of that is like you're just purchasing the books. You're not even putting the stuff in your brain, because I think there's value in that subconscious work. Like reading alone is doing good things for you even if you don't act on it. I think that might be like a very controversial take, but I believe like heavily in that subconscious programming, and like just put those lessons in there. They'll come up when they're needed later. I mean, I think 100% the best place is to act on them. You know, the Stoics talked about like they were critical of the what do they call them, pen and paper philosophers, like people who are just kind of like airy fairy. And I mean, I love to read those guys like Plato and stuff, but like those weren't like warriors and men of action necessarily. Regardless, I guess that's like tangential to my point, is that, you know, there are like layers of inaction, and I think like the worst, or like to me the most tragic, is you take that first step, like you buy a course but you never open the first module, or you get a gym subscription but you never show up to the gym. Like that's so, and like all of the business model of any of these, like you mentioned Planet Fitness, I go to LA Fitness, any of these commercial gyms, that's literally their business model. Because if everybody who had a membership showed up, it would cripple them. Like there's not enough room for all the people that have memberships. So the sad part is they're playing on that part of human psychology, and maybe there isn't a way to fix it at scale. But I think the work that you're doing and the work that I'm doing is to help people wake up to their own potential, like to get more people doing what they know they need to do and what they want to do. Because ultimately, I think, like personally, and especially for men, but people in general, like if you sit there with unrealized potential, you're accountable to yourself ultimately, and you can't run from that internal accountability. Like if no one's telling you X, Y, and Z, like they'll let you climb the ranks slowly at a 9 to 5 or just kind of coast along. You might be able to find a partner, you might be able to start a family, but like if you don't fully actualize the greatest of which you're capable, inside. And so like you have to lay your head to rest every single night and be like, I didn't give 100% today. And
Mm-hmm.
I think if you do that for like 1 year, 2 year, 5 years, 15, like decades of time, I think that wears on your soul in like a really tragic way. And so, yeah, like the work that you and I are doing is super important for that reason. Like it's letting more people step into the place where they're doing the work necessary to become the highest version of themselves.
Yeah, Tom Platz has like I remember his gym philosophy, which I took on a lot. It's like if I walk out of that gym and feel like I didn't give 100%, I'm gonna walk back in that gym and give 120%. Like, and it's very hard for people to self-actualize these. They don't know what they want to do. It's so ingrained in them that they go through high school, they go through college, they get this degree, and then they get this job, and then that's it. That's the line. They made it. They made it. Like they don't have to do anything else the rest of their lives. They just made it. But for people like me and you, or any young guys, or just people looking for more, it can be tough because you feel like there's always something to do, and you lay your head on the pillow every night, and you're like you're just it's kind of like being mentally trapped because you know what you're doing is not what you should be doing. You feel like you need to be doing something more, but you have no clue what it is. That's something I struggled with for a long time too. Just so I was working at a karate studio and I hated it. Like, it was like, I was working with like special ed kids and like disabled kids, and I loved it, right? I like working with kids, but it's very draining, and I knew there was always something more for me, and it would just be like it's like hellish. It really is. Like I talked about it before on some posts that I did, but it was like being stuck in like the middle class, or this very like stagnant position, is like literal hell on earth. There's no momentum for where you can go. You're not falling, you're not rising. You are like eternally trapped, and that is hell to me. That is very much hell on earth.
I completely agree, dude. I mean, I think that like mediocrity or like normal, words like this, like would be some of the largest insults I could expect to hear for myself. Like I would hate to be called anything close to like status quo, normal, average. Like I love getting told like I'm weird or like I'm strange or like I'm
Yeah.
just uncommon. Like though, like I look at those 100% as compliments because I'm not trying to live like 99 plus percent of people have ever lived, like I don't want to be just great, I want to be one of the greats. Like it's one of those things that like you have to command excellence from yourself, and it's by proxy going to separate you from 99% of people, and it's going to alienate you and it's going to make them a little bit uncomfortable. And it's not to like pass judgment in either direction, but certainly know and be prepared for like if you're somebody sitting there and you think that you're also called to do something great or do something uncommon, like by definition, uncommon means like it is separated from the average or the middle percentile, which is most people. So be prepared that most people are going to treat you differently, and it's going to maybe put you on a bit of an island for a while. It's why the community aspect of what I'm doing is so important. Like having a group of guys to get on a call with and talk about, like, because everybody who's done any amount of self-development has gone through it. Like, oh, you're not going to eat that, bro? Like you think you're better than us? Like what do you mean you can't it's just one drink, like just come out with us. Like what are you like stretching before? What do you have to wake up for? Like nothing happens on Saturday. Like no, dude, I'm chasing my dreams. Like you like, and it's hard to imbue that lesson into other people. So it's not for us to proselytize or evangelize like our purpose to other people. You just have to become undeniable in your own right, so that eventually maybe they come around and are interested. Like that's been the best part for me, is that, or like it's been a helpful for me because I think, especially when it comes to like family or really anything where there are people that you care about, but you want them to change, you can kind of get into this temptation to like want to change for them or like really grab on and make the change. But at the end of the day, you just have to live like an emblematic life and then hope that those moments of like, hey, what do you think about this? Or I noticed you do this, like tell me more about that. Like those are the moments where the door is opened. Like in this like Kabbalic and Gnostic tradition, like there's that quote in the Kabbalion where it's like the lips of wisdom are sealed except to the ears of understanding. And that's true in like all arenas of life. Like I grew up in a Christian school and they talked about evangelism. Like I was really into apologetics, like how to defend the faith. Just because I think I like to debate and I like to kind of like logic battles and stuff. But it's so funny because I don't know, like you're never in anything ever going to evangelize someone. They have to evangelize themselves. They have to like
Right.
see or be curious to hear about God. And then that's when you talk about it. And again, it extends to all arenas. It's not just faith. It's like you can't make an unhealthy person want to get healthy. They have to decide like, all right, I'm ready to get healthy. What are your tips for it? Versus like coming in and being like, here's your project, like here's your training plan, here's your diet plan, here's your whatever. Like if they didn't ask for it, they're not going to use it. That's
No, it's just like spewing as much results as to people as you can to show that it works. Like you can't, there's not a single thing you can force someone to do in this entire world. You cannot force anybody to do a single thing. There's not one thing. It all depends on the act of their will, I guess. While I was in the military, one of the sergeants said, people can take every single thing away from you, but they still cannot take your will. So if you just, it has to come from within. You can't, and it's hard too, because we talked about this before, but it's like you want to see your family do better. You want to see your friends do better. You want to tell them, hey, this is what you should be eating. You should be waking up at this time, but it's just not, it can come off as very like demonizing to them that they feel labeled as they're doing something wrong, and it makes them not want to do this even more. They get trapped in this mental prison basically, where it's like, well, my son is telling me that I should be doing this and I'm not, so now I'm a bad mother, and now I'm just gonna, it's just a perpetual type of cycle.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a thing that I'm still personally trying to get better and better at, and trying to like just walk and live in the walk as much as unbelievably possible, and then grow the platform as big as possible so that like people can have something to look at and be like, I don't know if inspired by, but like I think it's so critical to have aspirational figures. It's like why I've built my business around like kind of that Renaissance idea. Like the slogan of my company is like be the Renaissance. The point is like you have to embody the movement that you want to see. If you want to see this like change, this redirection, this renaissance of, we started our conversation talking about like AI and this takeover, but these communities, even like, if you want to see that, you got to be that. You have to internalize it, do the work for yourself, make those internal changes, and don't worry about its scale or like where's society going. Like society is made up of the individuals. And so if enough people are inspired to drastic change or wake up, quote unquote, to their potential or what the hell is going on around them, and they stop taking the just passive input machine that is currently kind of the paradigm, then that's how we can affect change at scale, rather than stressing about, like mass manipulating people. I mean, like it's really interesting, like the self-destructive behavior. This is like a definitely very tangential, but it's just what I don't understand that aspect of people, and it's even in myself, right? Like we have to constantly overcome our resistance to the things that we know are good for us. Like why like I don't understand what it is about ourselves that is consistently that way, but it's about like armoring your mind to that resistance when it comes, but also hopefully using your subconscious to program yourself into just automatically being healthy. Like go to the gym so many times in a row that like you literally just don't even think about it anymore. Like to the point, like it's like brushing your teeth. Like you didn't debate, should I brush my teeth this morning? Should I not? Like you just did it, right? Like it's so programmed into you because you've done it every day of your life since what, 5, 6, 7 years old. So yeah, you got to treat like other positive habits that same way, and hopefully just extend that time frame long enough that it's just part of your identity rather than like this other, thing I force myself to have to go through. And I think like reading is super important to do like that. Meditation is super important to do like that. Journaling practices, like whatever you want to put on your personal list. But like certain things have to be just core tenets of like identity rather than, oh, I participate in that.
Yeah, and I think it comes down to that the acts are simple, but they're not easy. It's very easy to sit on the couch and watch Simpsons season fucking 27 for the 100th time and eat a bag of chips, but it's not easy to go to the gym and actually put yourself through this thing because you're not going to see the results instantly. You're just not. These are very delayed gratification type of practices. I mean, meditation, working out, eating, these are not like tangible things that you can get that instant. If you're playing a fucking video game and you level up, that's like a very tangible thing that you're getting this immediate dopamine response. So I think it comes down to like today where people are just super comfortable with things. They kind of shelter towards comfortability. They don't want to take risk. They don't want to work for something. There's no like effort put in. If it's not like blatantly in their face right there that they're going to get it that instant, they don't want it because it's just how they're programmed. You open up your phone and you can see anything in the entire world instantly. If you go to the gym and you do 100 bicep curls, you're not going to see anything for God knows how long, right? It's just compound effect, and people don't want to keep doing things. They lose this motivation. There's a very big burnout, especially like with the New Year's resolution people, for example. 5 days before, oh, I'm gonna get on this brand new diet. I'm gonna go vegan. I'm gonna go vegan for this year. Let's see how it goes. 10 days later, they feel like shit and they stop and they say, okay, maybe I'll try it again next year. So it's just there's not enough people that are just willing to stay consistent. And like we said before, the discipline's a huge thing.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think we could probably talk ourselves in circles here, but I want to get to the typical closer questions that I normally ask everybody. Um, our conversation hasn't directly followed these lines, but I think it's similar to the work that you and I do, talking about how it's important to, I mean, each of our stories, right? Like actualizing to be the best man possible. So I'm curious, in your eyes, what defines being a man?
Ooh, what defines being a man? I think it just comes down to honor and knowing what you do is right. If you're not actually confident in what you're doing is right, then there's no I just don't know how you could live if you're not actually doing what you think is right. To me, there's got to be some sort of like major conviction point. There's got to be this undying will to be. I think of people like I don't know if you're into like you were into anime or anything, but like Guts for example from Berserk, like this was a character that just stood by what he did so hard that he would die for it. He would die for it on the spot. So just having these values that you can hold so close to you that you're not going to fall under is what makes a man to me. Someone that knows what is right and that stands by it.
What are some of those things for you?
I think it comes down to not so much your political belief but like your values. Like, do you want a family? Like, do you believe family dynamics are important? Do you believe health is important? Do you believe God is important? Do you believe being spiritual is important? Do you believe that you should be healthy? Like, there's just these very core principles that make a man. Like, how do you view yourself in the eyes of other people? Do you care what other people think of you? Do you have these I wouldn't say like I wouldn't say extremist beliefs, but like just very, very steadfast, very concrete. Again, just comes back to conviction for me.
I like that. And then the second question is, if you could go back to a younger version of yourself and tell him one thing, what would that be?
A younger version of myself. Huh. I think it I don't know. I think it would just be just to act quicker, just above everything else, just to act quicker. Because I always wanted to do things, maybe I always wanted to play football. I always wanted to play football, but I never did just because I didn't think, I was the short kid. I didn't really want to do it. Starting with business too. Like last year, I was very hesitant about it that it wouldn't work. It wouldn't work out. Right. But if I just acted on it, maybe I'd be in a different spot right now. Just act speed, just moving with speed and purpose and urgency is something I'd tell myself when I was younger because there was a lot of wasted time. Like I'd just I'd play video games and I'd jerk off all day for 4, 5, 6 years. Like there was just there's no real purpose there.
Yeah, that's so huge. Velocity, like I think I wrote a post about it a couple weeks back, just like moving with velocity, like pick a direction and move with speed. Like it's so important. And both of those parts are important. Like you have to pick a good direction that you are aligned with and constantly audit that you're moving in that right direction. But also like urgency matters a lot. Like
And just go.
yeah, like you just gotta go. Like there's not a you're not running out of time per se. Like I don't believe in this. Like you're gonna miss your window. This is the last chance to get in on.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of like marketing around shit like that. It kind of irks me, but because I think opportunity will always be there. But the truth of the matter is like great opportunity presents itself to you and expects you to move quickly because somebody else is coming to take that spot. And I think you have to like come with that mindset, even if it isn't 100% concretely true. And yes, you could start in 5 years and it'll still be okay, but like you don't get those years back. Like, and so I don't know. Urgency is critical. I like that. And then finally, I think you're an extremely well read man. I'm also consider myself in that category. I love quotes. So I'm curious, what is one quote that's always stuck with you or that you try to live by?
One quote that has always stuck with me. Damn, that's a tough question.
I know it's a tough one on the spot, but I think
Yeah.
I like asking it on the spot because your gut reaction, the quote will be more true than if you had like prepared a cool quote. You know what I'm saying?
Oh God. Let me see. Dude, I really think it's the first thing that came to my head was the Tom Platz quote where it was like, if I'm not going to put 100% into my body, then what am I doing? If I come out without giving 100%, then I'm going to come back and give 120. Just because that's been so big to me in the sense of that I leave things on the table. Like I'll start something and I'll never finish it, and I'll go back and I'll wonder like why didn't I? I'll make calls for 2 hours, and then I'll stop and I'll be like, okay, I probably could have made more. I always try to go back and just maximize whatever I was doing. So and again, it's just with intensity, like just moving with intensity, just making sure that in that whatever small window you're working, you're doing it as intense as possible, whether it's working out, you're making calls, you're writing, you're doing whatever, you're walking, you're running, just doing it with such oneness and such intensity that you can come out and say, okay, I did this to the best of my ability.
Yeah, I completely agree. I am curious. This is not part of the closers, but I am curious, like, who is somebody that you like look up to as like a great man in history, like as like the most inspirational figure out of like all the books, like who's your like archetypal, like the man for you?
The man for me, does it have to be related to history?
Not necessarily.
The man for me,
Yeah, like
I would
the biggest inspiration.
I would say just for me, it was Arnold. It was Arnold Schwarzenegger. It's so cliche to say. It's so cliche, but he's just such a striking character. He's just the archetypal brute man that just takes life by the balls no matter what. And does he was working 18, 19, 20-hour days and he'd still fit in workouts in between there, 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours in the afternoon. Like he just had this it's just masculine in its purest essence. It's just he had all these core principles and all these acts that made me really attracted to him, in the sense that he was someone that I could look up to and know in my heart that that's who I want to be like.
I love that. Arnold's definitely, I mean, obviously the GOAT, but super, I think people like so many people are just like, yeah, Arnold bodybuilder, whatever. But like people sleep on the fact that he was like an immigrant, yeah, working those crazy
Yes.
long hours, became the greatest bodybuilder of all time, like most prolific, and then became one of the biggest actors of all time, and then became a governor of a state and a
Yeah.
politician. Like it's pretty like a meteoric rise and like absolutely unbelievable given his origins. So like honestly very slept on. Have you read any biography? I haven't read any Arnold biographies. Or do you know of any that are good?
Yeah, I have his he has his Arnold's bodybuilding encyclopedia, which is like this 700-page book of just everything about bodybuilding, his story, the history of bodybuilding. That's all I've read. I haven't read like his own. I don't know if he has any of his own like biographies, but that's what I've read, and it has pretty much everything that he knows about it. And to add on to that, I think Alexander the Great is just like also up there for me. I always like I was given the name Alexander, so it just felt like the need to figure out like what it meant to me. Alexander, defender of man. I mean, this guy just conquered everything and just took everything for his own. Um, yeah, that's another person I look up to very heavily.
I like it. Both really good answers. Well, I appreciate your time, Alexander. Let the people know that have soldiered on this far where they can find you and what you're working on.
Yeah, you guys can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Alexander Cologne, AlekZanderColon. I had to spell it a little differently because everybody had Alexander Cologne, but right now I'm building out a fitness course slash coaching program, kind of all encompassing life coaching, fitness coaching, holistic health in the future. And on top of that, working on some creative writing endeavors as well, because I'm very passionate about creative writing. But yeah, that's where you can find me and my plans for the future.
Excellent. And for those that are interested in hearing more, maybe you've come to this podcast from Alex's audience. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you found this insightful. Potentially could do more in the future for sure. I think there's like a lot of different topics we could go into. But you can follow along. Obviously, you're hearing this on either Spotify, Apple, or YouTube. Continue to follow along there for more podcasts. If you want to follow myself, you can follow at ZDSCHENKEN on Twitter and Instagram, and at Vitruvian Gentleman on Instagram as well. Thank you for spending your time and attention with me and Alex today. They are your most valuable resources. Memento Mori, and I'll catch you on the next episode of the Vitruvian Man podcast.
And if he fails, at least fails while daring greater, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who know neither victory nor defeat.